In contemporary culture, busyness has evolved into a performative identity. It is no longer merely a description of one's schedule, but a subtle declaration of relevance. To say, "I'm busy," often implies that one is in demand, indispensable, perhaps even successful. Yet beneath this socially reinforced narrative lies a paradox that few pause to examine. Relentless activity does not necessarily translate into meaningful progress. Indeed, the conflation of busyness with productivity may be one of the most pervasive misconceptions shaping modern professional and personal life. Busyness is fundamentally quantitative in nature. It concerns volume, frequency, and visible exertion. Productivity, by contrast, is qualitative. It concerns direction, coherence, and measurable impact. While busyness can be quantified in hours worked, emails answered, or meetings attended, productivity resists such superficial evaluation. It demands a more difficult and reflective question. Did any of this activity meaningfully advance a deliberate objective? The distinction becomes clearer when intention is examined. Busyness often emerges reactively. Notifications appear and we respond. Requests are made and we comply. Deadlines approach and we rush to meet them. In such a state, attention becomes fragmented across competing demands. The day transforms into a sequence of reactions rather than a manifestation of deliberate choice. Productivity, however, presupposes intentionality. It requires the capacity to differentiate between what is urgent and what is essential, between what is loud and what is transformative. Ironically, the very systems designed to enhance efficiency frequently intensify distraction. Digital connectivity has dissolved temporal and spatial boundaries, creating an environment in which accessibility is mistaken for effectiveness. The ability to reply instantly is often celebrated as professionalism. However, perpetual responsiveness erodes the cognitive conditions required for deep and strategic thinking. Each interruption, even when brief, imposes a switching cost on the brain. Over time, this fragmentation diminishes our capacity for sustained concentration, the very faculty upon which high-level productivity depends. Busyness also offers psychological comfort. It provides an immediate sense of validation. When schedules are saturated, people feel needed. When inboxes overflow, they interpret this as evidence of significance. Yet such validation is fragile because it depends on external stimuli rather than internal alignment. Productivity rests on a more stable foundation. It is rooted in clarity of purpose instead of the accumulation of tasks. There is also an existential dimension to the preference for busyness. Constant activity shields individuals from introspection. As long as one remains occupied, it becomes possible to avoid confronting deeper uncertainties. Are we pursuing goals that genuinely matter? Are we postponing ambitious projects because they expose us to potential failure? Busyness can function as a sophisticated form of procrastination, disguising avoidance beneath the surface of industriousness. It substitutes motion for progress and preserves the illusion of advancement without requiring meaningful risk. To understand productivity, one must shift focus from effort to leverage. Not all tasks carry equal weight. Certain actions generate disproportionate impact, whereas others merely maintain momentum without altering trajectory. The ability to identify high-leverage activities distinguishes the productive individual from the perpetually busy one. This discernment demands strategic thinking, long-term perspective, and perhaps most challenging of all, the willingness to disregard tasks that, although legitimate, are not essential. Prioritization inevitably entails exclusion. To choose one objective is to decline another. In cultures that glorify multitasking and maximal engagement, such selectivity can appear counterintuitive or even negligent. Yet attention is finite. When dispersed excessively, it loses intensity. Depth often determines magnitude of results. It is therefore unsurprising that many significant innovations emerge not from frenetic multitasking but from prolonged and undisturbed immersion in a single complex problem. Temporal orientation further differentiates busyness from productivity. Busyness typically focuses on short-term completion and immediate closure. Productivity frequently demands long-term commitment and tolerance of ambiguity. Complex endeavors such as writing a book, building an organization, or mastering a discipline unfold incrementally. Their progress may remain invisible for extended periods. In such circumstances, visible busyness may be misleading. Work that appears slow or uneventful may in fact constitute foundational progress whose value becomes evident only over time. The physiological implications reinforce this distinction. Chronic busyness, especially when accompanied by stress, sustains heightened cognitive arousal. While brief periods of pressure can enhance performance, prolonged overstimulation impairs executive function, decision-making capacity, and creative thinking. Burnout often emerges from sustained activity devoid of meaningful alignment. Productivity, in contrast, integrates cycles of intense focus with deliberate recovery. Restoration is not opposed to achievement, but essential for sustaining it. Culturally, the glorification of busyness reflects deeper anxieties about worth and identity. In societies where value is closely associated with output, inactivity is stigmatized. Rest may be interpreted as complacency. Consequently, individuals internalize the belief that constant activity is necessary to justify existence. When self-worth becomes contingent upon perpetual motion, the boundary between dedication and compulsion becomes increasingly blurred. Productivity requires a redefinition of value that emphasizes contribution rather than exhaustion, coherence rather than chaos. It is also important to recognize that stillness can be profoundly generative. Reflection, strategic planning, and creative incubation often occur during periods that outwardly appear unproductive. Neuroscientific research indicates that mental integration and insight frequently arise when the mind is allowed to wander. By eliminating unstructured time in pursuit of constant busyness, individuals inadvertently suppress the cognitive processes that enable innovation. Silence, therefore, is not emptiness, but latent potential. The metaphor of motion and trajectory clarifies the difference. A vehicle may consume vast amounts of fuel while moving continuously in circles. Another, traveling fewer miles, may nevertheless reach a meaningful destination. Energy expenditure alone does not guarantee advancement. Without a defined trajectory, acceleration merely amplifies inefficiency. Productivity prioritizes alignment over speed. Transitioning from busyness to productivity requires deliberate recalibration. It involves articulating clear objectives, identifying high-impact activities, and constructing environments conducive to focused work. It demands the discipline to resist low-value distractions, even when they present themselves as urgent obligations. Perhaps most significantly, it requires the courage to appear less busy. In a culture that equates visible exertion with commitment, strategic selectivity may be misinterpreted as disengagement. Over time, however, tangible results reveal the wisdom of restraint. On a personal level, the experiential contrast is unmistakable. Busyness often culminates in depletion accompanied by ambiguity. There is fatigue without fulfillment. Productivity, though equally demanding, leaves behind a sense of coherence. One may be tired, but the exhaustion feels purposeful rather than scattered. Ultimately, the central inquiry is not how much we are doing, but why we are doing it. Activity devoid of intention fragments attention and diffuses energy. Activity anchored in purpose consolidates effort and compounds impact. The distinction may not always be visible externally, yet internally it reshapes the texture of experience. In an era characterized by acceleration and constant stimulation, choosing productivity over busyness requires discernment. It involves resisting the seduction of perpetual motion and cultivating deliberate direction instead. While busyness may create the impression of significance, only productivity generates substance. In the long arc of a life, substance rather than spectacle is what ultimately endures.